Right. So as I said in my introduction, my next guest, he was first on the Freeman Report back in May 2023. He is the fabulous Billboard Chris. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Good morning or good evening, I guess I should say. I'm doing fabulous. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? Can you believe it's nearly a year since you were last on the show?
Yes, a lot of things have happened. Not as many people were talking about this back then, but today this is probably the number one cultural issue across the airwaves every single day. And several countries and states in the United States and even a province up here in Canada are putting a stop to what I call the greatest child abuse scandal in the history of modern medicine, the business of giving kids puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries
Yeah.
in a fruitless effort to change their sex.
Yeah, and I think a very, very worrying development since you came on last year is all of these new censorship tools and hate crime laws that are there to suppress anybody criticizing. And we'll talk all about that in just a moment. But Chris, firstly, it's probably worth, you haven't been on the show for nearly a year now. It's probably worth reminding everyone how you got started in all of this, because you have got a really interesting backstory.
Well, I mean, the short story is that I'm a dad of two girls, and I just got tired of society going insane. But the way I started off my campaign was back in July of 2020. There's a fabulous woman called Posey Parker in the UK who put up a sign that said, "I heart J.K. Rowling" at the Edinburgh train station. That sign lasted one day because some people on Twitter said it was hate speech. And now the government in Scotland is actually codified that into law, maybe as being hate speech, or they're trying to say that misgendering people or whatever is hate speech. But that sign got taken down. And part of what I'm doing is about freedom of speech as well. We should be able to have conversations about anything. And when kids are coming to harm, we especially must have conversations about that. But I got tired of people getting attacked and being fired and being canceled for their speech. So I put up a big billboard, which is where my nickname originally came from, for the same purpose. I put up this billboard in Vancouver that said, "I love J.K. Rowling." It also lasted a day because a Vancouver politician said it was hateful. She pressured the sign company. They took it down. So then I put up a whole bunch more throughout the US in September of 2020. But then up here in Canada, there was nothing I could do because none of the sign companies would work with me. And my whole vision is to start millions of conversations. So I did the only thing I could do. I said, forget you guys. You might be able to take down my sign, but you can't take one off my back. So I had some signs made. I wear them because it's just easier than holding them. And I go outside and I have conversations in the real world, downtown and at university campuses. And I started traveling Canada and then the US and now the world. And it's worked because a lot of people are talking about this.
Yeah, and you really have been all the way around the world, haven't you? I mean, tell us what you've been. I mean, we'll talk about the X case in a minute with Elon Musk, because I think that's incredibly important, and we can talk about these hate speech laws. But tell us what kind of places have you been to around the world over the last year, and what have you been doing?
So all across North America, probably 20 odd states, 9 out of the 10 Canadian provinces. I've been to England, Ireland, Scotland. I'll be heading to Portugal later this year. And I'm heading to Australia as well. So I'm not publicizing that too much. I don't feel like giving the government an excuse to try to cancel my visa. But of course, if they tried, that would just be to all of our benefit as well, because it would just start another round of media talking about their censorship. But yeah, I'm hitting all of the Anglosphere. I'll be heading to Portugal as well for a conference in September. But mainly it's the English-speaking countries that I'll keep hitting because I speak English.
And when you show up now, because you're pretty well known now, aren't you? Are you finding that you're showing up in capital cities and whatever, that people recognize you, they know what you're about?
Yes. So no matter where I go, if I have the signs on, I'm getting a lot of name recognition right away. Not so much name recognition. I'm getting recognized because people have seen these videos online. A lot of people know me for perhaps some of the violent events that I've incurred where people attack me for stating the very controversial children cannot consent to puberty blockers. But in normal life, when I'm not wearing my signs, I don't get recognized too much, which is nice. It's like the Clark Kent in the Superman disguise. He puts on those glasses and nobody knows who he is. I put on my signs or I take them off and nobody knows who I am. So that's nice. But it's also very, I suppose it's rewarding, or I don't know what the right word is. It's nice to see that so many people recognize me now when I have those signs on, because it shows how much this message is getting out there. Particularly the young men, when they see me, are especially encouraging to me, because they are not down with this at all. This is primarily being pushed by young women. This ideology preys on their natural empathy and their agreeableness. And they all know other young girls who are transitioning. And all these young guys see this going on and they don't know what the heck to do. So I think I'm helping to teach them how to talk about this and how to stand up against it, because they don't like seeing this happen to their young generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for doing what you do, Chris. I think it's incredibly important. Just before, we're going to take a quick break in a minute. And when we come back, we'll talk about Elon Musk and what's going on, this legal case with X. But before we go to the break, where would you say we are right now? Do you think that we're winning? Do you think that that this is still a big threat? How would you assess things right as they are right now?
So we're absolutely winning. There's no doubt about that. This is always the way it was going to go. We have to have this campaign of awareness where millions of people learn the truth. But the people pushing this, and the people on the left, especially in the political realm, they're doubling down. They're trying to make it so that certain states or parts of the world, they call it conversion therapy, if you want to help your own child feel comfortable with their bodies. And parents now risk going to jail. I know this is happening in Australia as well, just for trying to protect their own kids. So the left has gone insane, but the politicians don't always represent their constituents, because most of their constituents, most of the voters aren't okay with this either. If you talk to any mom and dad, I don't care where they are at the political spectrum, they don't like that schools are hiding from them that their own child has a new name and pronouns. So we're winning in more conservative circles and in centrist places. On the left, politically, they're just doubling down, but they can only do this for so long, because the truth is inescapable and it's going to keep spreading.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as they double down, they overreach as well, don't they? And I think that's clear what's going to happen in Scotland. I think it's going to be a big old mess there. And I think J.K. Rowling, she's obviously hoping that she gets arrested so that she can collapse this whole thing. Chris, we're going to take a quick break now. And when we come back, I want you to tell us all about this legal case. It's actually in Australia. There'll be lots of people watching in Australia now that maybe haven't heard of what's going on. So we're going to talk all about that after this short break right here on TNT.
Hey guys, great news!
News Radio.
TNT Radio News.
Matt Boyland here with your TNT headlines. Australia's demanding full accountability from Israel after an Australian aid worker was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. Moscow has confirmed it is now investigating whether the US has played a part in any recent terrorist attacks inside Russia. And Donald Trump has posted his $175 million bond in his New York civil fraud case, allowing him to begin appealing the judgment.
Are you enjoying listening to TNT Radio? Do you think we're doing a good job? Then please let us know. Why not leave us a like or a positive review, or comment on Facebook, Gab, or Getter? Help us get the word out as we cover the biggest topics of our time on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Right. So, Chris, let's start with this post that you put up on X. Tell us what the post said that has been taken down, hasn't it, by I think it's called the E-Safety Commissioner in Australia?
Yes. So according to their 2021 Online Harms Act, they appointed this unelected bureaucrat called the E-Safety Commissioner to determine what it is the citizens of Australia are allowed to see online. And apparently they can't even see a post by myself, a Canadian, on the other side of the world, because I wrote that this woman who has been appointed to the UN's panel of 20 health experts to determine healthcare policy for trans-identified individuals. This woman is named Teddy Cook. She identifies as a man. She's cut her breasts off. She's into bondage. She frequently posts X-rated material. She's into trans orgies. She writes that trans people have better sex when they're high on drugs. And she's into bestiality. She posted a picture of a dog having sex with a man, extraordinarily disturbing stuff. And I do not think that an individual like this should be crafting healthcare policy for other individuals who are dealing with mental health issues themselves. So I wrote that this woman, yes, she's a female, has been appointed to this panel. And I said, people who belong in psychiatric wards are writing healthcare policy for people who belong in psychiatric wards. Maybe not the nicest thing I've ever said, more acerbic than usual, but it's not because of this person's gender identity. It's because of all this disgusting thing, all of the disgusting things this individual takes part in. And so the E-Safety Commissioner wrote that I misgendered poor Teddy Cook and that I was showing hatred for this person because of their gender identity. And that's not true at all.
Yeah,
I'm simply stating what I just stated to you. Yeah.
And what does the UN have anything to say about this? I mean, it seems crazy that somebody like this would be appointed, like you said, to write healthcare policy for other people which are, vulnerable, essentially.
Well, what the UN has to say about this is that these are the types of people that they are going to put in positions of power to help spread this cult of harm all across the world. They are not our friends. We've seen this with everything. We've seen this with their agenda for 2030. We've seen this with their handling of COVID, and we see this with their handling of trans issues. Now, what is a transgender person? Really, there's no such thing as a transgender person. Transition is something they do. It's not something they are. But they've adopted this as an identity label and turned mental health issues into a civil rights movement. And to buy legitimacy for it, these middle-aged men who now think they're women who have a fetish called autogynephilia, where they get aroused by the idea of being a woman, to buy legitimacy for their fetish, they started going after the kids and turned this into a full-blown cult all across the world with government backing and with the backing of the greatest medical bodies in the world, who are also corrupt and have these ideologues running their organizations. So the whole thing's a giant mess, and we shouldn't have these disturbed people writing healthcare policy. We should have evidence-based pediatricians writing the policy for children, especially. And in countries like the UK, where they've conducted systematic reviews of all the evidence, that's what's now happening. And in countries like the UK, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Germany, just conducted a systematic review. They're all putting an end to this. But in Australia, it might be the worst.
Chris, thank you so much for coming back on the Freeman Report. The way you've described that is so clear-cut, and it's so truthful what is actually going on. Now, Chris, you've sort of delved into this world for quite some time now. I think that's the reason you can describe it so clearly what is going on, and you have just done that. What do you think is behind it, though? Because one of the things that, I've learnt through all of the people I've spoken to on this show is this is not a bottom-up movement. This is not a grassroots movement. It's very much top down. And, there's powerful people behind this, lots and lots of money. So, and usually there's an agenda, because you don't just give money to a cause and you support it and push it, and politicians don't get involved in all of this, and it becomes such a big force. If there is an agenda, what do you think the agenda is behind all of this?
So there's a profit motive, obviously, for some of these people. There are billionaires who 15, 20 years ago, when this was just a small thing, were donating to help form the first gender clinics. In the modern era, this really goes back to the 60s with a psychologist at Johns Hopkins University named Dr. John Money, who came up with this theory that we have these magical gender identities inside, and we don't. Gender identities are just essentially personalities. I say all the time, there are two sexes, zero genders, and infinite personalities, because that just sums us all up. But this is almost like a true religion. When I call this a cult, I'm not just saying that to get clicks or to, be hyperbolic about this situation. This is, for all practical purposes, a cult. And you have all these true believers now because they've gone through high school and university where they've taken gender studies, and they've fallen for this nonsense that we have what is essentially a gendered soul. that our sex is irrelevant, our gender identity trumps it. What is it based off of? It's all based off of regressive sexist stereotypes of what it means to be a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. So yes, there's a profit motive. Yes, the pharmaceutical industry is making money. But ultimately, this comes down to what is essentially a religious movement with a lot of true believers, and then virtue signaling politicians who are too dumb to understand what's going on and too weak to stand up to their own party. Because when gay rights were won in the first decade of this century all across the West, their focus for all these so-called LGBTQ organizations changed from gay rights to trans rights, because they've got to keep the donations flowing and keep the money going. And this just became the new civil rights era for them to push this new civil rights issue. So it's just a giant mess, is the short answer. There's not one single source of it.
Yeah, and it is a mess, isn't it? But you're fighting back, Chris. And obviously now that post that's been taken down by the e-safety commissioner in Australia has come to the attention of quite a powerful man, hasn't it? Elon Musk. Tell us about what Elon is going to do.
Right. So the order from the e-safety commissioner was to X, not to me, to take down the post, or else they could face a $782,500 fine. So what they did was they've geo-blocked it. No one in Australia can see it, but they're now appealing the ruling, which Elon didn't have to do. He didn't have to take this on, but he has, which is tremendous. I've learned that I can also appeal it, so I'll be doing that. I'm working with the Free Speech Union in Australia, but I don't really have any money behind me. But this guy Elon Musk sure does. So thank you so much to Elon Musk for appealing this, for fighting for free speech. And this is just going to continue to wake up millions more about the attempts of the Australian government to censor users' speech all around the world, not just in their own country.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll be watching this very, very closely, Chris, and you'll have to come back on when we get some more developments. Now, Chris, obviously you're traveling all around the world. Do you have a crowdfunder or somewhere some people can go to support what you're doing?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I have a donate button on my website, billboardchris.com. People can support me that way. But really, I want them to follow me on X or Instagram, but mostly X, at Billboard Chris. Get educated about this issue and start having these conversations, because this only ends when we end it. There's no magical figure or government body who's going to come along and fix this for us. It's up to us to protect our own kids, and we do that by educating the population, one person at a time.
Well, I'm going to say it again, Chris. Thank you so much. I've got two young kids, 15 and 11. They're, that age where they're going through teenage years. And it petrifies me, the fact that they won't be, because, we as parents have had those conversations and we make sure that they understand what's going on. But it petrifies me, the thought that children can be captured by these ideologies, very destructive ideologies, which essentially puts them on pathways of harm for the rest of their lives. So thank you so much for what you're doing, Chris. And like I said, you need to come back on definitely on the Freeman Report again in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, James.
Thank you, Chris. Right, okay, we're going to take a short break now. And when we come back, I'm going to be speaking to another really interesting guy. His name is Paul Thorpe. So don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are, right here on TNT.